there should be, of course, one of the panelists also mentioned leadership. There should be structures, okay, for leadership. So talking about at what point will you say a young person becomes someone that you should bring on board to be part of leadership? So we keep saying you're young. So we need to understand at what point should a young person be said, okay, fine, you are capable to do this. So we should also help by trying them first. So this idea of, okay, you're young, hold on, no. We need to try, and that is also one of the problems that we have, where issues of you are looking for people to fill in a position, and there are no adequate skills. Thank you very much. An important question and amazing discussion from our panelists going forward. We would love to explore this question to understand. Let's create a background. I want to paint a scenario where you need to understand we have two sets of African youths in Africa. Okay, so there are colonial independence or independence youth, and there are post-independence youth. So let me put it this way: you have colonial independent African youth, and then you have post independent African youth. Let me expatiate. Let me give more color to it. Now, we have our leaders. Most of them come from the colonial independent African youth, and they have a different expectation. They have different needs. And then you have post-independence, where I belong, African youth. We also have different expectations and different needs. So most times we begin to look at these two, it clashes. Okay, so the needs of these people not actually the need of these other people. So you find that these other people will be expecting you to do the same thing as much as they had seen it or they perceive it to be. So it's always good for us to create this scenario to understand, so that anyone at the sound of our voice that is in this section will understand the background and understand when we start asking for certain things, why we are asking for them. Now, having said that, the practical need of African youth, of post-independence African youth, the colonial independent African youth had a desire to take away power from the colonial masters. So their desire, their need was to create nationalistic movements. They wanted to be heard. They wanted to create government. They wanted to take away government, controlling economic power out of the colonial masters. So that was the idea. That was their push. That was their desire. That's what they needed. And then they joined school. So the idea of go to school, get a good grade so that you can secure a good job, and then grow from the ranks. That had the push. That's the urge. That was the urge. Now you are now talking to independence, post-independence African youth. What are our desires? Two things that I have discovered as a global young leader. Two things that I have discovered interacting with young people across the globe. They want to have the right to decide their future. African youth wants to have the right to decide their future. That is one. Two, they want to have access to that future. So one is having the right to decide the kind of future they need. And the second is having access to that future. You see, these two needs, having right to decide the future and having access to that future. These two needs, when they are not provided, they can lead to an army of massive destruction when they are not provided. That is why you see agitations here and there. You see young people talk about we are not included, we are excluded, and so on.
كل هالعالم في دار تختصر عالم وقالب وصفها العالم دبي كوكب آخر دبي كوكب آخر هلا يا كل هالعالم في دار تختصر عالم وقالب وصفها العالم دبي كوكب آخر بهالقلوب تتفيا ومن هالليل يتضيا لأنها دارت الدنيا وعشق ما له آخر يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا دبي يا سلام يا دبي يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا دبي يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا دبي يا سلام يا دبي يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا سلام يا دبي
Very much, Aruba, for that. Let me say, I am happy that I listened to Professor Lumumba talk. Professor Lumumba voice echoes hope and brings vibe for positive change. And it was on that I would need to draw my concluding note. Now, young people need to understand that government of the day has limited understanding. That is the truth. I have to be factual. Have limited understanding of our needs. So we need to let them understand our needs. So that comes to organizing ourselves, advocating, using our voice, coming together. And the first thing we need to do is personal development. We need to work on ourselves. Right education. All right. When I mean education, I don't mean go to school, get a good grade. We have a whole lot of channels. Join groups, associate yourself with progressive unions. Join organizations that you understand will create awareness and make certain things that are not clear to you clear. All right. Young people need to collaborate more, and this is one thing that we must mention. Collaboration is very key. I see a lot of one individualistic approach. We can't solve African problem individually. We need to come together, and that is the echo of Professor Lumumba here. Organizing ourselves. Governments will not organize us. They want to disorganize so that they will be able to conquer. This is like a generational gap. Okay, we don't want these guys to take over. You saw what happened in blockchain industry and emerging technology. This is the space
people. Yeah, according to my own opinion, I personally know the reason and what's happening in my country. Honestly, there are problems that distract those young people to do not think carefully and know exactly what they need to do for themselves to improve their lives, and then also contribute in the whole country development and also the our continent development. So in my country, like Sudan is one of the most poor countries in the world and in Africa. So this thing made everyone who is like a little bit like having education or good enough in something to immigrate and travel outside the country. Most of them, they go to Europe and Middle East as well. So if you go to the Khartoum airports, you find like daily, like educated people are leaving the country. And then the rest of the people there in my country, like you find like 6 or 7 families depend on one person who is just working, let's say in UK. For that person himself cannot be creative in their whatever they're doing. So now no one is having a clear mind. I know the root of this problem because I've been like a child who was growing up in a village. So they are like some got a chance to do education and to study, some do not because of the like kids labor. So you find like 12 years of age girl that working in how cleaning housing and this thing, and some others they go after animals and farming. Unfortunately, I wish if those ones they get the chance to grow in whatever they do. So work isn't bad, but those ones they end up like frustrated. They don't contribute anything, not to themselves, not to the country. The other thing, one of the problems in my country as well is racism. I've seen this in the schools. I've seen this growing up by my eyes, like when kids fight there. Like I don't see anyone who like make an action, stop these things. So most of us do grow up with a broken heart, the bullying in the schools, and this is all over the country. Tribalism as well. So when it gets to the point that you go and you apply for a job, you will end up like rejected. Why? Because you're not from the tribe of the minister or something like that. So those two things, like leaders in my country and all over Africa, I know this problem is also going on there. Even in South Africa, I've seen it by my eyes. Like, yeah, most of the students are like the South African Black students do not continue. For example, the one in masters do not go for PhD. Like few of them, they go for that, even if there is fund for them, particularly for those South African, the Black ones by name like this. No one even apply. You see. So the problem is really big and it's rooted there. So if we solve those problems like kid labor and racism and tribalism, as well as early marriage. Imagine like 12 years of age in my country get married. So what youth are you talking about? Yeah, they're young there, but they don't have a chance to do anything. So this is, yeah, and according to what I've seen during my life and the opportunities I get, and one of the key opportunities was the AIMS scholarship, the African Institute for Mathematical Science. It gets one of the institute has five centers in South Africa, Rwanda, Cameroon, and Ghana. I just forgot the fifth one. So the center is well known for accepting the bright students from all over Africa. This is a key opportunity. Like myself, I grabbed that opportunity, and most, or let's say like 90% of PhD holders, and some of them are having good positions in universities, whether in Africa or outside. So this kind of institution are very good for helping the African young generation to go forward in terms of science, and that what will make them like able to develop their countries. So that's a good idea if someone like does the same thing for other institutions. And now, there are a lot of institutions in like managements and other fields, but they are not like all over Africa, or there is no opportunity for everyone in the continent to go and study like for free, as I had this opportunity. And I think I don't want to say much now. Maybe later.
You've said quite a lot.
That were championed that the youth need help were not the same people there 25 years ago. Slowly, the youth have had opportunity. Let's be honest. When it comes to, I don't know about different countries, but in Ghana, for the last 6 years, the Ghanaian youth have had opportunity to get into politics. Some people are in MP, 35, paid, and MP, We've had opportunities. How are we taking the advantages of the opportunity that's given to us? We've been screaming for years that we don't get it, but when we get it, what do we do with it? We have people who they go into politics and they stop being youth. The same people that was screaming 5-10 years ago, today go into and get opportunity to be in a leadership role. So I always say to my people that we have refused to lead, and because we have refused to lead, we've not had followers. because we get into positions, decision-making positions. In Ghana, we use Ghana. And we just go there and get to the point where we stop being youth. We start acting like we are 50-year-old, but forget like we just finished university. So I think that the issue is about responsibilities of we taking charge of the small loophole that we get to enter into the decision-making table. We don't get it. So if you get it, what we do, we can talk about the government. We've been talking about this for the last 15 years. We've been talking about, so if we have the opportunity to do it, what do we do? So I think it's about time that as we talk about the advocacy of some things that need to change. When we get a chance, what do? We need to make sure we grab it and make some changes that we can have progress to lead. If we've had people leading us, the young generation, that get into, good position. Like I said, I'm using Ghana as my basis of my conversation, the basis of my conversation. We've had opportunity, we had young generation going into politics, going to high positions. But when they get it, they stop being youth. That's the reality. So it's about time we take responsibility and help ourselves and try to say, look, we have to change something. And if you as a young man coming up, as much as we are screaming, we are not going to stop. We're still crying. We're still going to call government to help us put structures in place. Until then, start taking charge of your own life. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so Nicholas, if I understand you, you seem to put a whole lot of emphasis on the role of the youths in themselves in deciding their own fate, not really necessarily government, isn't it?
No, government, people are screaming. I'm still part of it. I'm advocacy of government need to put things in place. I'm running business. SME, I'm a small business running. I have about 30 staff. It's the taxes and everything is not easy. I'm just telling you that government, we will still try and call for government to do stuff. All I'm trying to say is the youth, me as one of them, advocacy for change, it's been there for 15 years ago. It's been there for 20 years ago. It's not easy with young people. I'm talking in terms of Ghana, or had opportunity to have Ghanaian young generation to get into positions that they can help what we're talking about. But they refuse. So
okay, so the point you are making is that even when young people eventually get there, they themselves, instead of being the change, they don't change. They join the rest of the class that we have been complaining about. So it's more like you've been complaining about this thing, and now you are now in place to make a change, and then you yourself are not able to do that.
So that's what I'm saying. That I don't know about different countries, but I want to believe that if we have to be honest, in Ghana, we've had a lot of young people in our political landscape for the last 10 years.
But don't you think that, well, I don't know if that's the same for other African countries.
Well, I'm hearing Nicholas speak about how there has been opportunity for youth in Ghana to really take up those leadership positions. And though he does seem dissatisfied with how it has turned out, for me personally, in South Africa, I wish that we had that opportunity. So in South Africa, in terms of governments, we still have a government who was elected more or less in 1994, past when we were just the youth to come in and contribute to the government. And this is obviously a problem. On it about the problem of power within Africa is that now these people who fought, like Faith was saying, probably take over from them and carry on and develop and innovate for our own country. So I feel like that's the problem that we're facing in South Africa. And the issue is that now the power is so concentrated among these older generations. I mean, the people in power are 60, 70 years old, and they're trying to rule and make policy implementation and legislation for us who are in our 20s, 30s. It just doesn't translate. So until we have the opportunity, hopefully soon, like they had in Ghana, to kind of take over from that governance, personally, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of change that's made in terms of youth, with youth in mind in South Africa, until we get those opportunities to also make legislation and make policies and implementation for youth, but also operated by youth. And if you're talking about values, Ayuba, I think as globalization has increased, there's definitely been the problem of the more Western ideals which are permeating in Africa, things like in capitalism and so on. And these are not inherently African concepts. I don't think they are. I think there is one broad cultural phenomenon I feel like all African countries share. And in South Africa, it's called Ubuntu. And this is essentially just caring for your neighbor and caring for the person next to you, aside from any monetary gain or any benefit. It's just the thought of, I am who I am because you are who you are. And I think once we are able to implement this on a national scale, on an international scale, even within the African continent, we can see way more development.
And that's what makes it difficult for the youth or the young leaders to change anything. For example, if I go and join the government in any sector, I wouldn't be able to change anything because the roots of the old government is there. And we know the mentality of the elder leaders all over the Africa. Then instead of me changing something there, I will be changed eventually to be such a corrupted and selfish person who would say like, if I'm not able to change anything in this country, why wouldn't I change my own situation or my family's situation? So yeah, this is in fact what makes it difficult for the young people or the youth to do something to them, to their countries. But if we could rather think what we could do like outside these government's things. We don't leave the government itself alone to do anything for us. We start from our families, we start from the parents that who do not really know how to raise up their childs in such a way that they be independent even from the governments. Yeah, that's what I think it should be done, like, yeah.
Okay. What about, perhaps we should touch on issue of gender as well. When it comes to participation, now there are two things now. It's one thing to be youth, then also when it comes to gender participation in governance?
Well, in my country, the gender participation in government is not that wide. I mean, like, yes, you find few ladies are in the government. I mean, previously, before the new government comes, like 50% ladies in the government, in the lead as leaders, like ministers. But the thing, they just put them there to hold the place on that chair, but they don't have the right of anything. You could find them outside on the TV. They don't say their thoughts. They say what are the others, the men in the government saying. So no freedom, even if you're a minister in my country. You don't have your freedom to do what you think that is right in our that helps your country.
Okay.
Okay, right.
So this is a very important question that's been raised. Who is an African youth? I need to define an African youth in the context of agility. An African youth is someone that is bold. Youth is the character of Okonkwo in Things Fall Apart of Nwaobia. This guy, for all of us that have had privilege to read the book of Things Fall Apart, Okonkwo demonstrates the African youth. It's embodiment of courage and vigor and strength. African youth is not an age issue, actually.
Thank you. First of all, I would just like to echo the thoughts of Prof who just joined us about organize and you will realize. And I think this is such an important sentiment for all people across the African continent, for all youth across the African continent, to really take up those leadership positions, to really mobilize yourselves within yourselves to make a change. Yes, we are facing a lot of barriers to entry. Yes, we are facing a lot of barriers from the government. But once we organize, we will realize that we can achieve our goals and that with us, there's immense power. I love the examples that the Prof is giving, especially in the South African context. There's been so much history, there's been so much evidence that youth really is the future and that the youth is the people who can make the change within our African continent. Specifically speaking on the South African level, we have our youth from 1976 who demonstrated and protested for a change. And there's no difference between that youth and this youth. The only difference now is our goal. And again, I would just like to urge the policymakers to really engage the youth in these conversations. I would like to urge the government to engage us about what we want, because we do have the solutions. We know the problems. The only thing we are missing are the resources to implement our ideas. So those are my final thoughts for today. Thank you so much, Ayuba.
So in conclusion, I would just say Africa has problems, yes, but we need to admit that the governments or the leaders cannot do anything by themselves alone. So society and governments must put their hands together and work towards solving these problems. So yeah, all what we have been like mentioning cannot be done by the government alone or by the society. So families need to know their young peoples or the young kids, the needs of those ones, and they need to think and organize things accordingly. I mean, we do not leave everything for the governments to do. That's all I think would help.
Thanks for being here. I mean, the participants is very important that we can all share ideas. What we are talking about is just the beginning. We have to continue to have the conversation. We might not end up changing it, but the more we talk about it, somebody will pick it up and change something. All I also will leave to the generation or the youth that we say, as much as we are asking for it, we are waiting till they give it to us. But when we get a loophole, we get any chance that we get in there, we need to take advantage of the opportunity that we get. I use my landscape, my area to talk because there's been small opportunities. We have not capitalized on it. So we have to start leading. We have refused to lead. And the moment we start leading, we'll get followers to follow and go along.
Many of those young people who are actually going abroad to study, who are going into music and art schools, who are going into study at university abroad and do their masters and degrees, are actually coming back to Africa. They understand the importance of coming back to the continent, to their home country, to actually build and develop and grow. And what you're seeing is a lot of development happening in the private sector. The problem is that, as somebody actually pointed out, where there was development in the private sector with blockchain technology, people actually trying to use crowdfunding, etc. These were actually blocked by the government, unfortunately. So you have a lot of innovation happening. But what needs to happen after that is actually being able to go back to the government and work in partnership and in tandem with them and saying, okay, we want to include you in this. Because when you have a number of new startup fintech companies from young people who have studied abroad, come back to the continent and wanted to build something for where there's a need, there wouldn't be a service if there wasn't actually a need. So they're literally plugging into supply and demand. They're building services that are then being shut down by the government because the banks here haven't thought about expanding into fintech, for example, or creating or innovating. And effectively what you're getting is them shutting down whole companies because they refuse to innovate. I think there is a distinct lack of, like I said, infrastructure, but infrastructure that encourages people to actually innovate and to work in systems that are basically collaborative rather than competitive. So the more we can collaborate together with private institutions and government and startups and existing infrastructure, the better off we'll all be.